I always thought overnight shifts would be the easiest. You sign up for a little boredom, maybe some coffee jitters, and in return you get the place to yourself. That's how it was supposed to be when I agreed to cover the graveyard shift at the storage facility. Just me, a desk, a bank of old monitors, and rows of metal doors out there in the dark. The pay was decent, and the manager said it was so easy you'll feel guilty cashing your check. That's what I was thinking when I signed in just before midnight and heard the lock click behind me. The office was exactly what you'd expect. Yellowing linoleum, humming fluorescents, a battered chair that leaned like it had given up. There was a faint chemical tang in the air, like cleaning fluid that never quite did its job. The monitors flickered with black and white feeds of the property, aisles of corrugated metal units divided by cracked pavement and chain-link fencing, all washed out in grainy gray. I tried to settle in. I even laughed a little at how much the place looked like a set for a haunted movie. The first couple hours were uneventful. I browsed my phone, sipped vending machine coffee that tasted faintly of plastic, and listened to the building sigh as it cooled. Occasionally I'd hear the wind moving across the lot, making the fence rattle and the metal doors creak. The security lights outside buzzed, and every so often a moth would thump against the smeared glass of the entry door. It was almost hypnotic. A little after 2 a.m., I noticed one of the screens showing a faint movement down by Unit 117. The image was grainy, but something flickered at the corner of the camera's view, almost like a shadow stepping back into darkness as soon as I looked. My skin prickled. I leaned forward, searching the screen. Nothing but an empty swath of asphalt, a rectangle of harsh light, and the angled roof of the storage row. I told myself it was probably a cat, maybe a drifting plastic bag. But when I rewound the footage, there was no sign of anything. I stared for longer than I'd like to admit. To calm myself, I made the rounds, flashlight in hand. My footsteps echoed down the aisles, shifting gravel underfoot, the beam of my light swinging over rows of padlocked units. It was colder outside than I expected, the kind of chill that gets under your jacket and makes you want to hurry. I checked Unit 117. The lock looked undisturbed, but I could smell something faint, damp, metallic, like an old penny rubbed between wet fingers. I tried the handle, half expecting it to rattle, but it held firm. I caught myself glancing over my shoulder, half convinced I'd see someone watching from the shadows, but the aisles were empty. I kept moving, telling myself the security lights were just flickering the way they always do. Back inside, I tried to focus on paperwork, but the silence pressed in. The fluorescent lights seemed to buzz louder. Something in the ceiling above my desk ticked, off rhythm and persistent, like a watch buried in drywall. I found myself watching the monitors again, eyes darting from screen to screen. My hand trembled when I reached for my coffee. I started to count the storage units in my head, a habit from boredom. But tonight it felt like a ritual, some way to anchor myself in something ordinary. Then, around 3:10, the motion alert chimed, a soft, digital ding that almost made me laugh with relief. Finally, something explainable. The monitor marked the north fence, near a row of RVs. I scanned the feed, half expecting a stray animal or a trespasser, but the lot was empty. Us. I leaned closer, angling the monitor to cut the glare. The lot looked deserted, except for the shifting shadows from the security lamp. The RVs lined up like silent sentries. Then I saw it. The nearest RV's door was hanging open, just barely, a thin sliver of black, too narrow to notice unless you were searching. I squinted, trying to remember if it'd been like that on my earlier walkthrough. I was sure it hadn't. My mind started spinning through explanations. Maybe the wind had done it, or an owner had left it unlatched during the day. I told myself I was being jumpy, but I couldn't shake the sense that the open door felt wrong, like it was waiting. After a minute, I radioed the lot intercom just in case. Standard procedure, even though no one should be out there at this hour. My voice sounded too loud in the tiny office. No answer, just a low hum of static. I hesitated, then took my flashlight and keys and stepped outside. The air was cold enough to sting my cheeks. As I walked across the lot, every sound felt magnified. The crunch of gravel, the distant drone of traffic, the low moan of wind against the fence. The RV's door was still ajar, swaying ever so slightly. I shone my light inside. The beam caught dust motes and the edge of a plaid blanket on the dinette, but nothing moved. The air smelled stale, like fabric that hadn't been disturbed in months. I called out, and my breath fogged in the narrow space. No answer. I stepped up, shoes scraping on the metal step, and pushed the door open with my knuckles. The interior was cramped and shadowed, empty except for the blanket, a coffee mug tipped on its side, and a peeled sticker on the fridge. I checked every corner, even knelt to look under the table. Nothing. No. But, as I started to back out, I saw something etched into the condensation on the window. Uneven letters traced with a fingertip. "I see you." My stomach lurched. I stared at the words, my own breath blurring them further. My brain tried to rationalize. Maybe a prank. Maybe old graffiti from a previous renter. But the letters looked fresh, the lines beaded with moisture. I wiped them away with my sleeve, just wanting them gone. For a moment, I waited, expecting movement behind me. But there was only the faint echo of the wind. On my way back to the office, I walked faster than before. The shadows between the units felt deeper, and I kept glancing behind me, half expecting to see someone stepping from the darkness. When I reached the door, I fumbled the keys, my hands slick with sweat despite the cold. Safe inside, I locked up tight and checked the monitors again. The lot was empty, the RV door now firmly shut. I rewound the footage, but the door never moved on screen. It was closed the whole time. I stared, certain there'd been no one but me out there. For a while, nothing happened. I tried to convince myself the condensation message had been meant for someone else, written days ago, and the door had swung by chance, just a trick of wind and nerves. I busied myself, rereading the logbooks, jotting down notes with a pen that felt too heavy in my hand. But the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. I kept catching movement in my peripheral vision, a flicker on the edge of the camera feeds, a quick shadow slipping between the rows. Every time I looked straight at it, it was gone. At 3:41, a sharp noise jolted me upright, a metallic clatter, unmistakable, right outside the office door. I froze, pulse skittering. I strained to listen, holding my breath. So even the sound of my own heartbeat seemed too loud. The clatter came again, a dragging scrape, like metal on concrete, close enough that I could feel it in my chest. I slid out of the chair, keeping low, and inched toward the office door. My mind shuffled through possibilities. Raccoon, vandal, maybe a loose latch from the wind. Every reasonable thought felt thin and brittle. I pressed my eye to the slit between the blinds. The bare-bulbed security lamp cast a hard white circle onto the concrete just outside. For a moment, there was nothing. Just the cold, unmoving air and the hum of the fluorescents behind me. Then something shifted at the very edge of the light. I couldn't say exactly what. Maybe a shape, just broad enough to block the reflection on the glass. My mouth went dry. I blinked, trying to sharpen my focus, but it was gone, leaving only the faintest impression, like a smudge on memory. With shaking hands, I locked the deadbolt and double-checked the chain. I wanted to call someone, anyone, a friend, security, my manager. But I told myself I'd sound ridiculous. I think there's something outside, but I can't see it. Instead, I watched the monitors, eyes darting between the feeds, trying to convince myself that grainy static and silence meant safety. That's when the office lights flickered, not just once, but in a slow, deliberate rhythm. On and off, like someone was flipping the breaker with purpose. My scalp prickled. I grabbed my phone and tried to dial out, but the screen was frozen, refusing to respond, the time stuck at 3:44. The building's old clock ticked on, undisturbed, mocking the frozen digital display. The light steadied, but now a faint tapping began from somewhere above me, moving in a slow circle around the perimeter of the ceiling. Tap, 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 like fingernails tracing the molding. I backed into the corner, clutching the flashlight, but the beam seemed swallowed by the space. My breath shuddered in and out, each inhale laced with the sharp sting of ozone and something older, metallic and rotten. Desperate, I tried to focus on the screens again, searching for anything that might explain it. That's when I noticed the cameras weren't just picking up the lot anymore. The bottom left feed, which should have shown the north fence, now displayed the interior of the office. My office, lit by the same flickering lights, the battered chair empty. I stared at the image, unable to look away, as the camera angle slowly panned, showing the locked door, the cluttered desk. Then, abruptly, it tilted up to the ceiling, capturing the spot where the tapping had started. Cold realization settled into my bones. I was being watched, not from outside, but from somewhere within the building itself. Or maybe even closer. Every hair on my arm stood on end. I spun around, shining the flashlight wildly, searching for a camera lens, a hidden panel, anything. The tapping stopped. The silence that followed felt unnatural, like the building itself was holding its breath. I backed toward the desk, never turning my back to the room. I told myself again that it was just a faulty system, a crossed wire, a prank, a glitch. But the fear felt too real, too sharp, to be anything but deliberate. Suddenly all the monitors went black, every single one, plunging the office into a darkness deeper than should be possible with the overhead lights still burning. I couldn't see my own hands, only the memory of their trembling. I tried to move, but my legs felt rooted, heavy, as if the linoleum itself had grown soft and sticky beneath my feet. In the pitch black,